Hello there, my name is Callie, and I'm very excited to share with you a project that I've been working on for the last several months. I wanted to do a little different format of a video and present it as a sketchbook tour. These are the initial sketches and concepts for a tarot deck that I'm working on illustrating about dinosaurs. And I'm going to go through some of my thoughts on the esoteric meaning and the symbolism that I incorporated on each of the cards, 78. But in the interest of time, I've included kind of my outline of the scientific information that I want to present in the booklet that will come with the deck, and what my interpretation of the card meanings are in the upright position. Welcome to the prehistoric world. This is the mock-up that I've done for the initial color for the world card. I'm not sure if this is going to be the final version, but all of the cards are going to be in hand-painted watercolor. And without further ado, the first card is the Fool. This is a creature called an Ichthyostega. This is one of the first creatures credited with crawling out of the slime, as it were, one of the first terrestrial creatures. And so this was my interpretation of the Fool card, which represents the call to adventure, the jump off the cliff, so to speak, and the first foray into the unknown. It's also got some little sea scorpions in there and various Devonian water life. Next is the Magician, and this is the infamous Therizinosaur. These are actually herbivores, they are not predators, and I liked the implication of his scythe-like claws being like wands or commanding intention. And each of the elements is represented in this card. The elemental suits that we have are a little bit different from the typical tarot. In place of the cups, we have the eggs for the element of water. In place of pentacles, we have tree stars, the element of earth. In place of swords, we have wings. That's the suit of the flyers of the air element. And in place of wands, we have bones, which you'll see later, that suit involves mostly carnivores, so trying to create some elemental themes around those. So the meaning of the Magician for me is the manifestation of desire, the ability to impress one's will upon their environment, and desire to change things to be suitable to your vision. Next we have the High Priestess, which is the Parasaurolophus. It is a type of hadrosaur that has a unique large head crest that's been speculated to amplify sound and facilitate communication and calls. And this is important for the High Priestess because she is the embodiment of speaking your truth into being, and expression and communication, and being in touch with your inner voice. And on the traditional card, you see that she's surrounded by various fruits, and I wanted to showcase the unique looking pine cones of those coniferous trees in the swamp. Next we have the Empress, the Triceratops. Very regal looking dinosaur with a large head crest. The Empress is about opulence, fertility, and potentially motherhood, harmony with nature and the cycles of life. Next we have the Emperor, the Gigantosaurus. This was a very large theropod, although not actually larger than a T-Rex, and from an earlier epoch. These ones actually lived in Patagonia alongside the giant Titanosaurus, so I wanted to show that in context of the mountain and show kind of the regal scale of these creatures personifying rulership. And so typically in this card you see the throne in the mountains, signifying magnitude. Next we have the Hierophant. And this one is a Styracosaurus, surrounded by a couple of Pachys. Styracosaurus is a type of ceratopsian. It has very large spikes around its crested frill, and I thought it looked very imposing and impressive. And in the painting I'm going to be portraying the god rays, or the ambient light, kind of showcasing the holiness, I guess you would say, of the creature. And next we have the Lovers, and these are Avimimus. These are a type of oviraptor that have been found in sleeping positions and nesting positions very similar to birds, although they are not birds. They were very attentive co-parents and kept nests and roosted. And so the Lovers is about partnership and co-creation and collaboration on shared goals or interests, such as bringing new life into the world. I wanted to show them in an affectionate pose and kind of have a little heart thing going on with their heads. And next we have the Chariot. This is the Gallimimus, who is a very fast-running dinosaur, similar to something like an ostrich. So the Chariot is about charting a course, creating direction, and grabbing life by the reins, or taking control of one's own destiny. And so I wanted to show kind of this bifurcation instead of having the sphinxes, because traditionally the Chariot, of course, is an extremely human-centric card, and it has the Chariot being drawn by sphinxes. But I wanted to show kind of the duality between the rodents and the lizards, who would end up being the inheritors of the earth after the dinosaurs went extinct. And so it kind of shows the option of taking different adaptive routes. Next we have the Strength. This is the Yutyrannus. This was one of the main dinosaurs to be found, heavily feathered. And so it's a very large theropod, similar in overall shape and build, of course, to a T-Rex, but with the main difference being the head crests here, and the imprint evidence that they've found of filament feathers covering the body. And this is speculated to be present because it lived in potentially colder parts of the Earth, although the whole Earth during that period was much warmer. It was really interesting going into this project. I learned a lot, and there's still so much research actively going on, and part of my hope in providing a little bit of scientific background, as much as I was able to gather from a lot of reading, tons and tons of documentaries, and kind of my overall experience growing up. My cousin was a curator at the Natural History Museum, so I was kind of big on dinosaurs as a kid. But it's really interesting to see the constantly evolving narrative surrounding different dinosaurs, and how, you know, some of them are thought to be warm-blooded. You know, maybe a lot of them are thought to be warm-blooded, and, you know, the feather thing was kind of a big shake-up in the not-too-recent past. But now, of course, we know that there were quite a few that were feathered. And it's kind of interesting to see this major shift from, you know, the toys that I was used to growing up, which were very naked. So he has on his winter coat, and assisting him, I have these oxpecker-like birds that speculated about being a symbiotic creature you might find alongside a dinosaur with that kind of integumentation that would require cleaning. So they're picking off potential parasites. And this one I had never heard of before and didn't know about until I watched the recent dinosaur documentary narrated by David Attenborough. That one was particularly good. You should check it out. But this is the Hermit, and he is the Dino Chirus. And these things are huge. They're really big, and they primarily live in swamps. And so I thought that that was a really good embodiment of the hermit dynamic of the seclusion and taking time to oneself to reflect, seeking peace and solitude, to be alone with inner thoughts, removal of stimuli to focus on essentials, and simplicity. So here we see him wading in the water and holding a stick. And in the painting it will have the light filtering in, similar to the lantern which he's holding. And this is the Wheel of Fortune, and I really wanted to do a highlight on the evolution of fungi and the huge impact that this had on changing the cycles of the earth and what kind of vegetation would be possible after the advent of decomposition of hardy things like wood material. There had been kind of a lot of accumulation, and it took a while to evolve the means to break that down fully. And with the introduction of fertile, soft soil through these biological processes, many different things were able to co-evolve. So that was during the early Cretaceous period that there was this boom of the first time that we see distinctively fruiting, because the mushroom is the fruiting body of the mycelium, which is largely invisible and underground. And this is kind of the equivalent of what might be thought of as their flower, although it's not quite like that. And I wanted to show the march of time through the skeleton, which is traditional on the Wheel of Fortune card. I didn't show all four corner things because I thought it would be best to showcase just the different types of mushrooms and follow through with that aesthetic. But I show, again, the duality of the rodents. And here we have the Confuciornis, which is an early type of missing link bird. So the wheel, in general, means the introduction of new cycles, evolution of new relationships, and adaptation to opportunity. And next is Justice, which I've arranged as a scene between several Deinonychus fighting against an Acrocanthosaurus, which is a large theropod. I wanted to show something that looked like a set of scales in the posture, because it's speculated that these little guys would actually latch on and hold on and use their agility to get the upper hand and get in a high ground position and then attack downward. And it's also been speculated that they could have been social and attacked in packs or teams. So the meaning of justice is karmic law, cause and effect, and balancing of energies within a system. So this is the ability of the smaller to overcome the larger with teamwork. And this one got a few watercolor splotches on it, but ignore that. This is the Hanged Man. This one was kind of a fun little happenstance discovery. This is a frog that they have recently discovered that was preserved in amber. And there's kind of a gap between something like the giant Beelzebufo and primitive frogs. So this was an interesting link because, of course, frogs are very squishy and don't necessarily get really well preserved in the way that something like a dinosaur who dies in the desert and gets fossilized very easily might. So because we found them in amber, of course, we know that they were terrestrial. And before, it had been speculated that that might be too dangerous for them and there might be too many predators in that space, but they were there. So this is called the Electrorana, and the meaning of the Hanged Man is acceptance of fate, sacrifice, and ability to make peace with circumstances, patience and biding of time. Because, you know, from this little guy, amphibians would come to be extremely successful after the fall of the dinosaurs. And next we have Death. And here we see the iconic Triceratops as a skeleton. And the scene is the sulfuric wastes. So I wanted to show a location like Yellowstone. Of course, I don't know exactly how volcanically active it would have been at that time, or where else in the world might have been like that, but this, even to this day, is a significant hazard to wildlife, and lots of animals die all the time at Yellowstone just to the nasty sulfuric water and lack of available fresh water, and the fumes and everything else. It's not a great place to be. But I thought it was very interesting that sulfur is this thing that wreaks so much of death, and yet recently in science, there's been this big discovery surrounding bacteria that have been able to live in sulfuric vents, and that life is possible, and other life forms too. I don't remember all of them, but they have various symbiotic relationships down there in a community and colonies. I think they were shrimp, but able to live in these very extreme conditions with what seem to be completely toxic and inhospitable materials. And so death symbolizes metamorphosis, the end of cycle, need for conclusion, transmutation of form, and the ability to thrive even in seemingly catastrophic conditions. Next we have Temperance. And here we have an iguanodon by a waterfall. I wanted to show a kind of peaceful scenario. One thing that's been really interesting about this project is really trying to create these scenes and speculate about the behavior of the animals and, what might have been daily occurrences for them, how they might have gone about their lives, and, really looking at them as living beings rather than just these blockbuster antagonists that they've traditionally been. So Temperance is all about the weighing of values, cleansing and letting go of what no longer serves, objectivity and clarity in personal affairs. Next we have the Devil, who is the Carnotaurus. Is very fitting in this role because of his two distinctive head horns. This is the skull of a pterosaur, Coniophis. And I actually had a really hard time finding information about snakes during this period, but this is one of the weird transitional snakes that kind of only has one pair of these back legs and is somewhere in between, a skink and a snake. And the meaning of the Devil is materialism, acknowledgement of reality and physical needs, taking responsibility for providing for oneself. So I wanted to show that, of course, as a carnivore, who are frequently demonized, but that was just their adaptation for getting their needs met. And next is the Tower. So the scene that I envisioned for this was the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event. This one was speculated to be caused by high volcanic activity, which led to warming and ocean acidification, which is particularly poignant and maybe relevant for us right now. But this was the major extinction that made way, actually, for pterosaurs in particular, and for dinosaurs to take over niches in the ecosystem that were left void by the mass extinction. And so the Tower means upheaval, dramatic change, destruction of a way of life to create space for something new to emerge. And next we have the Star. And I'm going to completely butcher this, but bear with me. This is the Lialinosaura. This is a really cool looking little dinosaur from the South Pole. Of course, the continent of Antarctica was in a somewhat different position, but it was still a pretty low latitude compared to the rest of Pangea. So I wanted to showcase, in the watercolor will be much more colored and spectacular, but I wanted to showcase the southern lights and the reflection, and the meaning of the star is the restoration of faith awe or inspiration, renewed desire to strive and chase dreams. Next we have the moon. This is the iconic Brontosaurus. I'm not sure why I couldn't find too much about it when I was actively looking for it, but I've always understood there to be kind of an association of the silhouette of the long-necked dinosaur with the moon. I'm not totally sure where I got it from, but that seemed to be a good fit to me. The meaning of the moon is the hidden subconscious secrets or veiled motivations, compulsive behaviors or habits, like being drawn to something. So I wanted to show it kind of longing. And this is, traditionally in the moon card, there's a lobster, and it turns out there's these weird prehistoric crumpy looking lobster things. I don't know if they regularly made excursions out of the water in this way, but evidently there's lots of different types of crabs and crayfish and lobsters that potentially do. So next we have the sun. And this is the resplendent Velociraptor. Of course, in reality, Velociraptors are heavily feathered, and they look a lot different than as depicted in the Jurassic Park movies. They are much, much smaller. They were actually showing Utah raptors, but these are part of the family of Dromaeosaurs. And I wanted to show it, kind of regal in the savannah with a nice bright sun. And the meaning is optimism and vigor, positive outlook, and desire to seize the day. This one's a little bit different. This is judgment. I wanted to show from a different angle, which is the extinction event that ended the reign of the dinosaurs, also now known as the KPG extinction event, where 75% of all species were lost after the asteroid struck near the Gulf of Mexico. And the meaning of this is a reckoning, a wake-up call, an emergency situation that forces us to act. So this is the view from outer space. And this one I was actually messing around with ink. In hindsight, I'm going to do the inking actually on the watercolor. I think it turned out quite a bit better. But this is the one that we saw previously on the cover. This is Pangea, the world. I wanted to really show the outlines of where the major continents that we know today are and kind of give them some perspective. If you haven't actually taken some time to look at this map, it's really incredible what formations are really, really old and which ones are somewhat new and had to be formed by the motion of the tectonic plates. And so the meaning of the world, this of course is the last in the series of the major arcana. This represents the end of that heroic journey cycle. And so the meaning is unity, totality, being whole or complete, finality or closing of a chapter. So I wanted to show that the unified continent, although of course in our history it's the opposite. That we started out in unity and now we have diverged. So on to the Earth suit. These are the tree stars. It's a throwback from the 90s if you're familiar with Land Before Time. That was what leaves were referred to as. But I was pleasantly surprised in the research to learn that that's a real thing, that the sycamore tree is one of the oldest deciduous trees, and they reproduce in, they're related to figs if I'm understanding it correctly, and they reproduce in somewhat weird ways. One that actually has these spiky gumballs, and I have a descendant of that lineage in my front yard, and they're horrific. They stick in your feet and they're quite pokey. But it was kind of cool. Like I didn't realize how ancient that adaptation actually was, and that went all the way back. But this was one of the first deciduous trees, and of course the evolution of them after everything being very hard, needles, lots of conifers and cycads, not giving up very much. So this was kind of a big jump and led to all kinds of other diversity besides just the diversity of trees that would come forth from that. So these are the life-giving tree stars. And the meaning of the ace is opportunity, new horizons, prosperity, and untapped resources. And that's the suit of pentacles. So for the two, or Moosaurus, these were originally thought to be very small dinosaurs, thus the name the mouse lizard. But it turned out that they had first just found juvenile samples and that the adults were reasonably sized. So they are shown in this, able to go into upright posture and graze from medium trees. So that means adaptation to change, prioritizing what's working, so kind of like the 80-20 rule, and responding to environmental feedback. The three of tree stars is a cool little dino, the Cycadosaurus. I particularly love this one because that's one of my favorite Latin words. It actually means parrot. It's just a fun, weird little word. And they're named that, of course, because they have these little beak faces. And it's speculated that they were potentially kind of brightly colored, too. They also have this filament feathering along their, pretty much just their hips and tail that has been discovered so far and verified. But and the purpose of it's not known, but creates a very striking silhouette. And the meaning of the three is teamwork makes the dream work, collaboration, delegation of duties, and building of a shared dream. The four is the Gracilaceratops. This is kind of a more elegant, upright postured ceratopsian dinosaur. I wanted to show off the upright pose by kind of standing against this rock. And when I was thinking about the composition of the cards, so I really hate it whenever there's a tarot deck that doesn't illustrate the suit cards. That drives me absolutely nuts. And I was kind of on the fence in illustrating these about whether the literal symbol of the suit was going to be featured prominently and literally in every single situation. So you're going to notice some variation on like how the suit symbol adapts to be appropriate in the scene, but I tried to keep the spirit pretty consistent, elementally at least. And so in this scene, instead of the tree stars themselves, this is shown as some mossy rocks in the river, which also kind of lends to the meaning of prudence, conservation of resources, and careful consideration. And the five is the Kentosaurus, similar to like a Stegosaurus, but this is a much smaller animal, and it has very spiky defenses instead of armor plating. And so the meaning is defensiveness, suspicion and reactivity, poverty or lack. And you can see him defending himself and lashing out and feeling anxiety from the environment. The six, this is Chantangosaurus. This is one of the largest of the hadrosaurs. So it's able to graze on large quantities of plant material. I wanted to show it in it's able to rear up and go into this upright position. And I wanted to show it kind of shaking this tree and knocking down other tree stars for others to eat. That was kind of an iconic scene in Land Before Time. So I wanted it to lend to the meaning of generosity of spirit, creating abundance for others, and sharing. Shared blessings. The seven is the Amargasaurus. This is a really cool looking long neck sauropod that actually has these spikes going along and forming two sails along its neck. The use of them and their purpose is not known exactly, but it's quite cool looking. The meaning of the card is perseverance through hardship, endurance and tenacity, and applied diligence to tasks. The 8 is the Pachyrhinosaurus. This is a ceratopsian with a large frill that has spikes on the end, and more importantly, it has this giant bone plate on its face. So it was kind of thought of as similar to a rhino. So I wanted to show the adult and the youngsters, and it's passing information along. The meaning of the card is apprenticeship, passing wisdom from one generation to the next, zeal and high standards, and pride in one's work or profession. The 9. This is the Apatosaurus, another long neck. The meaning is enjoying the fruits of labor, rewards or bonuses, comfortable social station. And I wanted to also show, in the original card I had a snail, so I wanted to sneak in an Achatina snail. These were gymongous, voracious eating snails. Of course, we can't have pet giant, I think they're giant African snails in America because they're invasive species and they'll eat you out of house and home, but every time I see a picture of someone who has it as a pet and it takes up half their arm, I'm kind of like, ugh, I wish I could have one, they're so cool. But yes, I wanted to just show an overall secure scene. Grapes, as my research showed, were actually pretty ancient plant life as well, so I wanted to show grapes and security and abundance and fertility as is shown on the original as well. The 10, I wanted to show the Valley of the Herbivores. It was a pretty iconic scene, which there's been some fossil evidence for shared nesting territories and things like that, but this may be an idyllic sort of fantasy. Here we have a ceratopsian marching into the valley. We've got various hadrosaurs and things in a herd. I wanted to just show like a secluded, protected, idyllic kind of valley where everybody could live in peace and harmony and just eat plants. This is the Valley of the Herbivores. The meaning of the 10 is the culmination of efforts, payoff at the end of a group project, a legacy paid forward as inheritance. And now we have the court cards. This is the page. This is the Ankylosaurus. This is a heavily armored dinosaur. He's got extensive plate armor and a giant club at the end of his tail for bludgeoning his enemies to death. The meaning of the page is steadfast ambition, slow accumulation of station, playing a long game. So he's said to be one of the slower moving because he's the earth element of the page. Pages also mean kind of in general like messages. The knight is the Stegosaurus, another armored dinosaur. He's got upright plates along his back, and he's got this big spiky tail that's actually called a thagamizer, and those were used to whap at enemies and impale them on the spikes. The meaning is taking responsibility, hard work and dedication, rising to a challenge. The Queen of Tree Stores, this one's kind of cool to me. I don't know, I imagine it in kind of a graceful feminine posture, I guess. And also, it was interesting speculating about the plumage. I think I'm going to watercolor it in somewhat of a peacock-looking coloration, but we'll see. This is the Platiosaurus. a predominantly bipedal sauropod, prosauropod, sorry. This is the ancestor, potentially, of the long necks, kind of an in-between. Meaning is financial security and conservatism, practical approaches, and simple pleasures. And of course the king of tree stars, is the Brachiosaurus. They were twice as tall as giraffes, but similar in their lifestyle. They would browse from the top of the trees with their extreme necks. The meaning of the king is secure attachment, sovereignty and detachment from the need for outside approval, authentic selfhood, and prosperity. He's just at the top of his game. So moving on, this is the suit of bones, which are wands and the fire element. The ace of bones is the fossil. I wanted to show an ammonite and trilobite from the early Cambrian. So fossils are actually a number of different processes can create fossils, but the main one that you might be familiar with is something like this, where the remains of a creature have actually been mineralized over time, and that makes them much more solid and able to withstand the elements, and that helps us to see a complete picture of their remains millions of years later. And so the meaning is creation with abandon, total surrender to process, entry into flow state, and following inspiration. Next we have the two of bones. This is the oviraptor. So they've traditionally been associated with being egg thieves, or stealing eggs, but it's been later determined that based on the face shape and their skull, that they probably didn't have that type of bite. They weren't necessarily cracking into eggs. So it's speculated that the reason that they've been found with eggs so much is because they're actually just very caring parents, and they nest and nurture their clutches. So I kind of wanted to show the egg in sort of a neutral position. Is he stealing it? Is it his? What's going on? But I wanted to show him in the traditional posture of overlooking a rampart or a cliff off into the horizon. And here we have a couple of bones. In these case, it's another raptor. And the meaning is planning for the future, evaluating options, plotting a course, and preparing to leave home or the comfort zone. The 3 is the Herrerasaurus. This is one of the earliest dinosaurs, actually. One of the carbon dating that the earliest discovered. The meaning is looking ahead, room for expansion, rapid development, or fast growth. And for the bones, I wanted to show these primitive mollusk shells washed up. And here he's hunted himself a fish, but he's looking out into the ocean, prospecting on, there's always more fish in the sea, right? The 4 is the Compsognathus, also known as Compes. These are small theropods, but not that small. They're about the size of turkeys when fully grown. The 4 represents community, festival, or celebration, which could be a wedding or the union of families. And I actually wanted to show them in this kind of field of primitive flowers. These are going to be proteas, so they'll be quite splendid and colorful. I'm really excited to get to paint these tropical environments. Next we have the 5, the Trudon. These are heavily feathered, small, bird-like. Oh, on the last one, copies have not been verified to have feathers, so they were specifically shown with none. That's what the evidence has pointed to at this time, but Trudons, although similar, actually have been found to have feathers and potentially be gregarious as well. So the meaning of the 5 is competition, animosity or rivalry, vying for social status, or inclusion in the pecking order. So here I have them with the 5 bones. These are rib bones of a carcass that they are squabbling over and trying to sneak past one another and grab a mouthful. And I wanted to show kind of the cracked mud, desert waste kind of biome. Of course, there's in each suit there's different biomes that are derived kind of from the traditional cards, but as a general rule, I wanted to show the tree stars and forest kind of biomes. I wanted to show bones in kind of the more arid biomes. The suit of eggs is all aquatic biomes for the most part. And for the flyers, the suit of wings, those have a variety, but if they're mostly showing animals in flight, so kind of sky biome, but there's a lot of ocean ones in there as well. But this is the desert. And as I say that, we switch it up for the 6, which is Baryonyx, which is actually a semi-aquatic theropod. They're very versatile, and they seem to occupy a really successful niche there on the coast and are able to dive and secure prey that way, but also kind of fit in between niches, competing with other theropods in the environment. So for this one, since we're in the water, thinking about how to show the bones, I actually got cheeky and I showed the 6 as the visual number rather than as a count of the suit. But here he has secured himself a fish from out of the school, and the meaning is success or accolades, public recognition, rewarded accomplishment for a job well done. Next is the 7. This is Ceratosaurus. This is a medium-sized theropod with a large nasal horn. They are believed to have hunted near water sources and scavenged. Here he's being threatened actively by a Thagomizer from some unknown Stegosaurus type deal. So the meaning is tenacity, measured reactions, maintaining composure under stress, and navigating tense situations. So here he is under threat, and he is needing to keep his cool. Oh, and I got a little cheeky with the number here too. This is an area of some debate. Typically, these kind of spiked tails have 4 prongs. Really early rendition showed 8 for something like a Stegosaurus, but of course there's many different types of this animal, and I think we're not entirely sure just yet the exact number and if it's that way all the time. So in the interest of the 7, we have the 3 rows, and then his horn make 7 bones. The 8 is the, I don't know, it's Colo or probably Coelophysis. These are small theropods that are thought to have been pack hunters. I found it interesting in my research that individuals actually had extreme differences in their morphology. There was a big difference in their size and everything depending on the individual. So that was kind of a cool duality between, being in this kind of mob mentality of the pack, but then also highly unique as individuals. So the meaning is quick decision making, reactivity and cohesion within a group, rapid movement or advancement, and being quick on the trigger. So they're shown here on the seashore, the rocky shore, and they're sort of laying in wait, observing the incoming tide or the water, and being ready to dash in at a moment's notice to snatch something up. Oh, and there's 8 of them. Sometimes I took it quite literally with the numbers and just put that number of animals rather than the suit symbol. I think it kind of gets the point across. The 9, this is the Allosaurus. This one was very interesting because there's really divergent theories about whether they were social and potentially pack hunters, or whether they were extremely competitive and actually, cannibalized and killed their own species. So I showed them in the latter situation. The 9 means a fight to the death or last stand, resilience or grit when being tested, showing one's true colors and strength in adversity. So this was him winning out on the fight, although he incurred some injuries. And the 9 is the teeth. The 10. This is the skeleton of a large sauropod. You can speculate, if you will, about whether it is Littlefoot's mom. But the scene that I set up was a carcass that has been discovered by a tiny little theropod who is a little bit overwhelmed, weighing their options. Here they have this enormous bounty and abundance of meat, but the sheer size and scale of that can potentially be a huge threat because it might attract larger predators, and he doesn't necessarily want attention being called to himself, but it's so tantalizing. So the meaning of the 10 is big risk coupled with big reward, potential for payout but danger for failure, overwhelming burden to perform, unknown variables, and personal insecurity. And we have 10 ribs. The page. This is the Dilophosaurus. You might not recognize it because it's quite different from what's depicted in the movies. They're actually quite tall. They're as tall as an adult person. They're shown kind of small in the movies. They're also shown with the weird neck frill things that they can pop out and spitting some sort of corrosive acid poison situation. We don't know for sure they didn't do that, but that was definitely some artistic license. That's really not how they operated, I don't think. But they were very competent predators, and we're confident in going forth into the unknown. So the page means exploration, excitement toward new possibilities, and swiftly venturing forth. So he's shown kind of here on a cliff, looking out into the bring me that horizon. The Knight. This is the Concavinator. It's a very cool looking dinosaur. I wanted to show it in a desert with the dunes. And in the sky there's a shooting star. This is another theropod. Lots of those, of course, in the suit of bones. Very large one, and it has these distinctive shark fin-like humps, so that part's actually bone, and it's speculated that these might have supported either a bunch of fat or a hump or some sort of sail, and the use of that is completely unknown. We're not sure why they have that. The meaning of the Knight is bravery, heroism, call to adventure, and sallying forth into battle, so he's ready to go. Next we have the Queen of Bones. This is a Spinosaurus. This is a semi-aquatic dinosaur that's been found to have specific adaptations in their bones and their feet to be good at swimming. Not just able to do it, but good at it. And this is also the largest known terrestrial carnivore. The evidence collected so far indicates that they were at least as big as T-Rexes and believed to be larger, so these are the big ones. So the meaning of the Queen, I wanted to show kind of a half above, half below water situation. I think I featured that in a few of them, but I do particularly love painting that. They're shown here with these weird saw-nosed, I think they're some sort of sharks, I'm not completely sure, but the meaning of the Queen is determination, fiery spirit, striving for greatness, and the thrill of the hunt. And finally, in the suit of bones, we have the king, which of course had to be the T-Rex, possibly the most iconic of all the dinosaurs. This large apex predator theropod. He, as the king, represents strategic thinking, overcoming challenges, leadership, and assumption of responsibility. Moving on to the suit of wings. This is a Meganora. This is one of the giant dragonflies of the late Carboniferous forests. They could get over a 2-foot wingspan. The atmospheric makeup was very different at that time, it was higher in oxygen, so they were able to achieve crazy sizes. The ace represents quick wit, sharp mind, intellectual breakthroughs, and eureka moments. The two of wings. This is the Nyctosaurus. These are actually pterosaurs. They're not dinosaurs. There is a distinction. Of course, it's called the dinosaur deck, but not all of the creatures featured are dinosaurs per se. But of course, pterosaurs, in the grand scheme of things, are closely related in time and space. So they pretty much have their own suit here. This is kind of a wild-looking one. Evidently, they have these large pronged crests on their head, and there hasn't been any evidence to show that these were accompanied by a sail. So it's thought that they were just kind of bare like this, kind of like a, radio wire or something like that. And the 2 represents being torn in two, a fork in the road, difficult decision or ultimatum, being forced to choose the lesser of 2 evils. The 3. This is the Ambopteryx. This is a Maniraptoran, which had both bird-like features, like feathers, but also bat wings. So it's kind of both ways. It's thought to be a tree-climbing and gliding dinosaur, and it has this long finger similar to perhaps something like an eye that it sticks into the holes in a tree and pulls out bugs or grubs or something to eat. So here is shown with a tear in its wing, and it's looking devastated. The meaning of the 3 is heartbreak, injury or loss, suffering and pain, and feeling broken. The 4, these are swords. Swordies? I think it's pronounced swords. These are small pterosaurs, here shown locked in a dogfight. They are territorial and positioning for rank here in the skies. Here we have one shown kind of collapsed after a battle, needing to recuperate, which is the meaning of the 4. It's the reevaluation of life choices, introspection, or reconsideration of priorities, and need to rest. The 5. This is the Dimorphodon, kind of freaky looking pterosaurs. They have these large toothy heads and relatively small wings. I kind of speculated that they have something of a Napoleon complex here. The 5 implies sneakiness or trickery, bad sportsmanship, winning at all costs, hubris, and unbridled ambition. So here we see the other 2 not wanting to be involved in this murder over here. It can also be, loss of allies. The 6. This is the Istiodactylus. It's a large soaring pterosaur like an albatross, which scavenged around coastlines, and it may have had a penchant for island hopping. So I have this 6-pack here shown flying over to this Ringed Island. The meaning is emotional baggage, putting the past behind you, needing to move on for a change of scenery. So they've probably exhausted the resources at their previous location and need to find a new home. So this one's quite weird. This has got to be one of the weirdest looking skulls that I've seen. This is the Pega Mastex. It has both a beak for, chopping things, and back molars for grinding vegetation, and they're thought to be herbivores, but they also have giant canines, which I didn't draw in very well here. But they have with much larger bottom tusks. And it's speculated that this could be that they are primarily herbivores but will be omnivores if necessary, similar to something like wild boars or peccaries. But boars will also, strip a carcass and chew the bones. So I found this one to be kind of confusing. I set it up in the scenario to fit with the 7, where we have a colony of pterosaurs over here, and it has made off with one of the babies who would be utterly defenseless in the face of a danger like this. So the meaning of the 7 is treachery, trickery, theft, picking on a weak target, low-lying fruit, strategizing, and easy win through guile. The 8 of Wings. This is my personal favorite dinosaur. This was my favorite when I was a kid, and I love them to death. This is the Urvogel, or the Archaeopteryx. This is one of the transitional links. They have found earlier specimen or earlier examples of other missing links like this, but this is kind of the iconic example. The Archaeopteryx. They are about the size of crows and are heavily feathered dinosaurs, but are thought to be kind of the move toward becoming birds. So this one's been caught out on a branch in this kind of choppy, rough river water here, some rapids. And I have these predatory fish just awaiting a slip up, and the Archaeopteryx is holding onto the branch for dear life here. And the 8 represents the having limiting beliefs, imprisonment or entrapment, victim mentality and self-pity, overwhelm, and inability to calmly and objectively view situations, taking things personally. So traditionally, the 8 of Swords is shown with the swords creating kind of a jail cell and the person unable to see the way out. So the irony here is, of course, that the Archaeopteryx can just fly away and get out of this rough situation. The 9. This is the Pterodaustro. It's a pterosaur that has these crazy bottom jaws that are filled with bristle teeth, similar to like a baleen whale. So what they would do is dip their head into the water where there are microorganisms and scoop it up and let the water filter out, and then swallow a mouthful of plankton or whatever, krill or shrimpies. But in this scene, it's not so ideal, because here we have some sort of early crocodilian lurking in the water, awaiting an opportunity when the head is lowered to strike. So the 9 represents anxiety, feeling of unease or lurking danger, being on edge, hopelessness or inevitability of victimhood, being haunted by past trauma. And the 10 of Swords, 10 of Wings here, is the Geosternbergia. This is a large pterosaur with a prominent crest. And here we have it shown on the seashore, where there is overpopulation and a competition for resources. So here they're fighting in the sky, and this one has not survived the fight and fallen. So the meaning of the 10 is defeat or collapse, failure to find balance, systems getting out of hand, and self-correcting through catastrophe. Onto the court cards, we have the Page of Wings. This is the Microraptor. They actually have forewings, they have them on both their arms and legs. They were thought to be an opportunistic type of feeder, not so much a straight scavenger, but able to hunt small quarry. And they were also found to be capable of powered flight. They weren't just gliders like their configuration here suggests. So the meaning is boundless energy, curiosity and questioning, restlessness or inability to sit still, constant motion. The Knight of Wings is the Pteranodon. It's a beaked pterosaur. It was toothless, and it dined on fish. This is sort of the iconic pterosaur, also originally called pterodactyl in general. Evidently that's not the correct term, but that may be the word you're familiar with. The meaning is rashness or impulse, idealism, defending beliefs, sense of honor or chivalry, and righteousness. So I wanted to show him kind of in this storm with the large wave crashing on this redwood kind of shoreline. The Queen. This is the Tupandactylus, which is a type of tapierid, which has a very large head crest that has been found to have attachment points for a sail. They're not really sure why they have it or if that was particularly helpful for flight. They've run various wind tunnel tests on it. So the meaning of the Queen is astute perception, attention to detail, being the voice of reason, clear-headed thinking, and sound judgment. So I wanted to show this in landed position rather than flying to show that kind of groundedness that I associated with the Queen. And she's kind of looking out and surveying and keeping a level head. And the King of Wings. This is the Quetzalcoatlus, which was just enormous. It's one of the largest flying animals of all time. It was absolutely massive. But despite their size, their lifestyle has actually been found to be that of a terrestrial stalker, walking around with their wings bent on this, knuckle here, much more like storks. They didn't really have the ability to skim. Despite their massive wingspan, it would have created too much drag and put them in dangerous situations. So the meaning of the King is mental discipline, head over heart, logical decision-making, value of truth, and resolute conclusions. And I wanted to show another little storky early bird here, possibly something like an Ichthyornis. And the scene is that of a kind of brackish mangrove coastline. Mangroves are one of my favorite trees. And finally, onto the suit of eggs, which represent water element or cups. A little bit of a smooth transition here from Pterosaurus. This is a pterodactylus nest up here on an ocean cliff, secluded from everything else. There are several types of eggs that need to actually be covered by moist leaves or seaweed or something like that, because in order to keep developing certain types of pterosaur, dinosaur, etc., eggs need to be kept wet. So the nesting behavior is believed to be covering these type of cliffside nests with fresh seaweed to keep them moisturized. So the ace means the tickle of new feelings, being guided by intuition, spiritual awakening, and being drawn towards a mystery. And here you can see the parent off in the distance. Two of eggs. This is Charithosaurus. This is a hadrosaur with a large helmet-like crest. It's possible that this is another one that was used to amplify sound. So that speaks to communication, commonality in relation, shared experience, partnership or parenthood, and emotional connection. I wanted to show a close-up scene of eggs actually hatching and babies coming out. So here we get some tender maternal care. And now we have kind of the opposite. This I really like this card. This is the Three of Eggs. This is the Moss Chops. Here shown in the midst of some courtship behavior, which is speculated to have involved some head-butting, jousting kind of action. Moss Chops is actually what's called a theropsid, which is not necessarily leading to the evolution of dinosaurs. They're actually more closely related to mammals. So these are, if you can believe it, our ancestors. These are very fatty, chunky. They lived in a time with really poor nutritional value plants, so they have to have big, elaborate digestive systems similar to something like a hippo or a cow. So the 3 actually means social events or rituals, a sense of community and togetherness, friendly competition, and camaraderie. And of course the end result after the rut being communion and coming together. So here we actually have another actually older theropsid. This is the Dimorphodon. It looks like a reptile with reptilian kind of features and a large sail spine, but it is not. It is more closely related to mammals, again. Here shown in kind of a reclining pose, looking out into the pond, bayou kind of, tending its eggs, but obviously kind of lost in thought. And the 4 of Eggs means the disconnect from reality, taking a break, stepping back to gain perspective, biding time, and detaching from the need to have a particular outcome. So he's just here waiting for the eggs to hatch, not really doing anything to tend them, just waiting patiently by. The 5 of Eggs. These are not dinosaurs. This is actually a crocodiliform, but one of my favorites. This is the Sarcosuchus. You can see they have these strangely shaped snouts. They were quite big. They are thought to have reached sizes of about 30 feet long. And here they're shown with their clutch of eggs being smashed here on the riverbank, and they are quite visibly distressed. But what they don't notice is the other 2 eggs, which have been safely hidden away in the bushes behind them, and this trail, which leads off into the future. Instead, they sit here dwelling on the past. So the 5 of Eggs means the negativity bias, crying over spilled milk, or in our case, squashed eggs, inability to see the path forward. The 6 is the Mesosaurus. This is actually one of the first reptiles who chose to go back into the water after emerging on land. They kind of noped out of there and went back. So the meaning is regression, return to a comfort zone, backpedaling of growth, or dwelling on the past. Although they're shown to be quite comfortable and joyous here, they look like regular water puppies. And the eggs are shown in the form of the bubbles. The meaning of the card is obviously that this isn't necessarily the progressive direction of evolution here. The 7. This is actually a theropod. This is Megalosaurus. I snuck him in here because he's in kind of a docile position instead of attacking things. This is one of the original dinosaurs that was on display at the Crystal Palace exhibition. I found that particularly interesting. This is one of the fossils responsible for really igniting people's interest in them. And so the meaning of the 7 is imagination, flights of fantasy, and dreams of possibility. So here he's shown sleeping and cradling his eggs and dreaming, as you know, if dinosaurs do dream, about the potential hatching and all the things that could come from it. And in the original 7 of Cups, it's depicted with all kinds of different things in the cups, and they're just kind of like floating off in space. So it was a particularly difficult one to relate to the world of dinosaurs, but I think this kind of captures that dreaming of possibility mood. And then we have the 8 of Eggs. This is the Memenchiosaurus, which is, they have ridiculous, even for long necks, they have ridiculously long necks. And contrary to popular depiction, i.e. Land Before Time, sauropods actually are really negligent parents. They don't stick around to nurture their young at all. They kind of just, drop them down and get on out of there. So the 8 represents abandonment, cutting losses, walking away from a situation, leaving the past behind, getting cold feet, or becoming disillusioned. The 9. This is the Archelon. This is an ancient turtle. I was really inspired by them because I was always enchanted by the creation myth about the world turtle. It exists in a few different cultures, but one version goes that the turtle was the platform on which I think it was the otter, dove down to the bottom of the ocean to get some soil so that life would be able to exist on land. I think they were, it was for the Sky Woman, I believe. They were trying to create a place for her to live because everything that existed was a sky or sea creature, and they were all okay, but she needed some help. So the otter went down, he got the handful of dirt, and his tenacity and dedication, he was the only one who could dive deep enough, but he emerged, unconscious, and his sacrifice allowed the soil to be spread on the back of the turtle, and Sky Woman went forth and multiplied and created the earth. Kind of a Gaia situation. So I wanted to create a forced perspective, again with the above and below, showing an island off in the distance from a certain angle as looking like being perched on the turtle's back. These were extremely large turtles, about 16 feet. That's really big. And I showed the round eggy shape is depicted as jellyfish here, Cnidarians, because traditionally turtles eat jellyfish. And during this time period of really warm seas, they just exploded in numbers, and we're actually having similar conditions right now, and problem is actually with overpopulation of jellyfish because they like the water so warm. So the 9 represents emotional stability, strong foundations, secure attachment and confidence, and supportive friends. The world turtle. And the 10 of eggs is the Protoceratops. This was the earliest known of all the frilled ceratopsians, so the ones with the large crests, although this species was pretty small overall size, similar size and such to the Cycadosaurus, but this one having a frill. Its descendants would go on to have all the big, impressive, Triceratops horns and crowns and everything else. But these little guys are just content with their family. They're enjoying abundance here under this arch, sitting in the shade and tending to their clutch, while the 2 young ones play in relative safety. The meaning of the 10 is abundance, family, and enjoying the comforts of home. And in the sky here we have a double rainbow. Going to be very magnificent in the watercolor. So we have the page of eggs onto the court cards of water. This is Diplocalus. This is actually a salamander with a really weird boomerang, hammerhead kind of shaped head. Very large salamander. The proper term is lepospondal. And they lived in the floodplains or swamps, but here I've shown him kind of roaming to hunt and visiting a tide pool. Of course they can't, amphibians can't reproduce in salt water, but I kind of liked the scenario and the visual of, usually in the Page of Cups, the fish is jumping out of a cup that he's holding, and I thought about a scenario where the fish had kind of been caught out at low tide in one of these tide pools and was frantically jumping out, trying to get out, and he's kind of just chilling on the side. Don't worry, be happy. Of course, because he's feeding on the fish. But here he's shown very lackadaisically blowing bubbles and reclining. So the meaning of the page is a whimsical dreamer, empath, or sensitive soul, seeker of synchronicities and surprises. The Knight. This is an ichthyosaur or Rhinosaurus. I think that's how it's said. They're very agile, social, and playful. They're kind of compared to something like a dolphin, although I'm sure they're not quite the same in intelligence and such. The meaning of the night is following one's passion or inner compass, listening to the heart, not giving up on dreams, idealistic fantasies. So here he's shown jumping and playing among the waves. The Queen of Eggs is the Elasmosaurus. Looks kind of similar to a Plesiosaurus, but this one's actually much, much larger. Plesiosaurs are actually kind of small. This is an aquatic dinosaur in that same family, and it is believed to actually give live birth underwater. So that was interesting to note. I didn't depict it here, but I thought it was very appropriate for the queen of the water elements because she's depicted as nurturing, compassionate, and supportive, emotionally available, and at home in the depths. So I showed this one completely submerged, and I showed some different deep aquatic animals. Here we have these weird corkscrew-looking nautilus things. I don't know if they're worms or nautilus. Here we have a larger nautilus species. And finally, we have the King of Eggs. This is the Mosasaur. Large marine reptile apex predator at the end of the dinosaur era. Of course, the one shown in Jurassic Park is redonkulously big. They didn't actually get to be that size, but they were still quite formidable. You wouldn't want to run into one. It was difficult to research what coral was really like during these various periods. I did my best to keep it consistent, but for the sake of beauty in the watercolor, I might not be able to pin down every single species of coral. But in this case, I found these really cool formations. I don't remember the word for it, but they're actually mollusks, and they have these kind of horseshoe features along the seafloor, and they're like razor clams, I think, kind of that kind of thing. Some of them create these ridges of standing up together, and here we have an octopus playing. I don't remember the name of that fish either, but it's pretty freaky looking. So the king represents balance, emotional regulation, self-control, and ability to mediate, consistency of mood and actions. So there you have it. Thank you so much for sticking through to the end and spending this time with me. I'm so excited to share this project. If you like what I'm doing and want to see more of it, feel free to send me a tip on coffee. I will include the link in the description. If you are so inclined, that would be very helpful. In the interest of expedience, I have really been trying to get this done for the holiday season. I don't think that I'm going to be running a Kickstarter for this deck. I think I'm going to actually do traditional publishing this time, although you can find my my Clarity deck, which was funded through Kickstarter, currently available for purchase in the shop. I think to make this the most widely available and to, potentially get it out in time, I think we're going to go that route. So any support that you could give in the meantime, just out of interest, either through tipping or buying products. I've got lots of wonderful quality products in the shop. Won't leave you empty-handed here. That would be very much appreciated. This has been really time-consuming, taking a ton of research, because, I don't know, for some reason I had the idea. It dawned on me that there was no tarot deck about dinosaurs, and I don't know why that out of everything I get, a million of these harebrained ideas a day. How did this one stand out? It was one thing that was within my power to fix, and I went and I saw on Reddit there's a thread that every so often gets a forlorn comment of, oh, why isn't there a dinosaur tarot deck? And I was like, you know what? I might not be able to do much in this world, but here's one thing I could fix, and maybe that would do something. And I felt strongly enough about it to see it through to getting all these sketches done. And now I will be commencing on the painting. I'm not sure how long it'll take, but I'm going to do my darndest to get it out in a timely fashion, and your support would be greatly appreciated. So thank you so much. Also, All of these sketches can also be viewed, the scanned versions, on the website elementalconflicts.com, along with lots of other great stuff and information and links to all kinds of other videos and the way they relate to each other. I hope you learned a little something and then have an incredible rest of the week. Thank you so much. Bye.